So my name is Bill Wolf. I'm an detective with Fairfax County Police. I investigate cases of human trafficking all across the Northern Virginia region. Human trafficking is inducing, recruiting, harboring, transporting, providing, maintaining, or obtaining a person through force, fraud, or coercion for the purposes of either labor trafficking or sex trafficking. So they are using human beings to make profit in one of the two industries, either labor or sex. We typically think of human trafficking and sex trafficking as something that happens overseas and not something that particularly happens domestically. But it's estimated that there could be upwards of 300,000 U.S. minors, so those under the age of 18, that are U.S. citizens that are involved in commercial sex every year in the United States. 44% of the cases that I work involve those under the age of 18 being exploited in commercial sex. We have identified over 300 victims in the past little over a year and a half now. We've recovered and removed 180 individuals from the commercial sex life. We don't really know exactly how many victims are out there, but what we do know is that less than 1% of victims are ever identified. So why do you guys think that is? Thinking from your perspective as a teen, right? And I'm telling you that most of the cases that we have are people your age that are engaging in commercial sex. Why do you think it's difficult for me in law enforcement or other professionals that are out there to identify those victims? Well, the victims don't self-identify, right? They don't understand that they're a victim. Part of that is because of the way that society looks at it, right? Like, let's assume we weren't having this conversation right now, right? Let's assume we roll back the clock 6 months ago or something like that, and your good friend walks up to you and says, hey, guess what? I'm having sex with random dudes for money. How would you respond to that? Would you be like, oh my gosh, I need to get you help? Or would you be like, you're disgusting, get away from me? Honestly. You'd probably be like, no, I don't want anything to do with you. Like, that's your choice if that's what you're going to do. But I'm going to walk away from it right now. So the way that we in society kind of respond to this particular activity and to this conduct, so to speak, really drives whether or not the victims themselves can self-identify, right? Whether or not they understand that somebody is taking advantage of them. The traffickers have gotten very smart, so they are gathering intelligence. They are on social media. They're looking for whose Facebook page or whose Twitter or Vine or whatever you guys are using, right? Like, they look for who they have access to, and that's really key. So that's the first thing they're looking for. Who do they have access to? Can they see what you're posting? Can they see what your likes are, your dislikes, things of that nature? Do you have your own cell phone, right? What teenager doesn't have their own cell phone? All right? So a lot of people think that, oh, my parents are like, they're invading my privacy, they're all up in my business, they're trying to read my text messages, blah, 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 whatever, It's important sometimes to allow your parents a little bit of oversight and a little bit of access to that information, right? Because the traffickers use that. They know that during the teen years, we all want privacy, and if they know that they have kind of private access to a potential target, then they're going to exploit that. They're going to know, they're going to do all their research, background checks, whatever. Sometimes we've seen where it'll be a chance encounter at the mall, right? Like, we might have a potential victim and she's walking around Barrows Mall, and all of a sudden some really good looking guy walks up to her and he just magically knows all the right things to say, right? Maybe it's random, and maybe he's done all of his research and he knew you were going to be in the mall tonight because that was posted on social media and he just happened to encounter you there and knew all the right things to say, right? That's what these guys are doing. That's how smart they are and how much effort they're putting into finding their victims that are out there. So they're looking for accessibility. Do they have access to that victim? Is there a particular vulnerability that they can take advantage of? And they're also looking for what we call suggestibility or suitability. The other piece is that the traffickers, sometimes we call them pimps, sometimes we call them gangs, sometimes we call them boyfriends. These are the individuals that are taking advantage of these other people. They're exploiting them for money. And what happens is a lot of times they make the intended or potential victim fall in love with them. So this may very well, a very common scenario is an older boyfriend, maybe 22, 24 years old, which is our average age of trafficker. Most of the time they tend to be very attractive young men. They seem to be wearing all the latest fashions, have access to a lot of cash and other things that make people think that they are stable and that they can provide for them. So they trick these individuals, and trick is kind of a strong word, but it really isn't true. They trick these individuals into thinking that, hey, I'm going to love you, I'm going to take care of you, And then they start to what we call normalize the behavior. What does that mean? If I'm a trafficker and I'm trying to recruit you and I'm normalizing the behavior, what am I doing? So surrounding them, like in parties and things where other people might be doing it, right? To make them think that it's okay, right? To make them think that, you know what, it's no big deal. Everybody else is doing it. So there's a saying among these individuals, why have sex for free when you can have sex for a fee, right? And so that's something that the traffickers use a lot to trick girls. The reality is that these girls do make a lot of money. On average, in Northern Virginia, a girl will make about $1,000 a night, right? That's pretty decent money. Does she actually get to keep any of that money? No, absolutely not. All right. So there's the money piece, right? What do you think is the other side to it? This is just real talk, right? So let's put it out there, right? The fact that today's society is much more sexually promiscuous, and this concept of free love and free sex, right? This idea really drives kind of that saying, because there is this presumption, so people believe, although falsely believe, that everybody's out there just having sex with everybody. Most individuals that are engaging in commercial sex are actually not doing so consensually, right? Which is a myth that exists. Most people believe that those that are engaging in that act are doing it consensually, and that is typically not true. There was a study that was done a couple of years ago that suggested that upwards of 96 to 98% of all individuals that are engaging in commercial sex are not doing it consensually. They want out of that lifestyle. They just don't know how to get out. Those people that are in this life, they call it the life, first of all, right? And they also feel very isolated. They feel like they live in a world that nobody else can understand. And then once they're in, they're in. It's really, really hard for somebody to get out of that situation once they're in. These people get stuck in that lifestyle over, and it's just a continual cycle until things get so bad that trafficker decides that they can make more money by taking that person on the road. And then they're going, that's when they actually leave home. What would happen if I took away your cell phone, I took away if you have a driver's license, I took away all your IDs, right? And I picked you up and I put you in New York City. How are you going to get home? You're not, right? You're isolated. I don't have to physically restrain you at that point. Like, I don't have to tie you down. I don't have to lock you in a room. You have no idea how to get home. And so that's what the traffickers do. They know at that point that I got you. Who do we call at that point? Do we call, do they call their parents and say, hey, I got myself in a bad situation. I'm stuck in New York City prostituting. Who's going to call their parents and say that, right? No. So they really get sucked into that lifestyle. They get isolated. And through that isolation and through the manipulation, that trafficker creates control. A lot of times we're looking for different stuff, right? We're looking for somebody to abduct somebody off the street, right? Like that we can see as trafficking. If somebody just rolled up in a white van, snatched a teenager off the corner, and then forced them into commercial sex, right? We can see that. But we're not looking for kind of these slow, deliberate processes. And a lot of the victims, they get sucked into the life. They don't see it initially either because they think, this guy really loves me, he really cares about me, we're going to have a life together, we're doing what we need to do right now. And by the time they realize what's actually going on, they feel silly, right? They feel like, wow, I got myself into this really bad situation, I should have seen it coming, and there's a lot of self-blaming that goes on. So part of our message that we put out there is that it's not your fault, right? It's not, you are in fact a victim. And so we are really trying to change the mentality, the way that we kind of view this crime in general, so that those that are stuck in the life will feel like they do have it out. We want to send that message that there is hope, that you can get out of the lifestyle and really kind of set your life straight and be a happy and productive member of society. You don't have to live that way. You don't have to be isolated. You don't have to live under somebody else's control. So what's important to understand is that one, the grooming process is very slow and deliberate. It can take weeks, months to groom somebody into the lifestyle. After they get them involved, most likely these victims during the initial stages are going to be living at home. They're going to be going to school every day. And it's usually going to be kind of these key hours in the afternoon when they're actually being exploited. That can go on for, again, weeks, months on end before the trafficker decides, all right, we're going to pick up and we're going to go somewhere else. Usually they will do that at the point that the girl says, hey, look, I want out, I don't want to do this anymore. That's usually when they'll pick up have to move somewhere else. What a lot of times, what parents and teachers and other people start to see is they start to see behavioral issues, right? They start to see that person who is now being exploited, they start to see them be argumentative, angry, isolated, withdrawing, fighting all the time. Most people that are what we call in the life, so they are engaged in commercial sex on a regular basis, they started about the age of 12 to 14 years old. So if you enter the life at 13, you're only expected to live to 21, all right? That is the average life expectancy. I mentioned that there's a means, right? Force, fraud, or coercion. So a trafficker has to use force, fraud, or coercion to actually traffic somebody, unless the individual is under the age of 18. If they're under the age of 18, legally speaking, I don't have to prove that anybody caused them to do it. That there's a presumption that they were coerced into it. The reason is not because we're saying that those under the age of 18 can't make their own decisions, but the argument is that nobody, particularly those under the age of 18, can get involved in commercial sex and understand what it would actually do to their brains, to their bodies, what the effects of engaging in this type of conduct are. So some of the recent research that's come out tells us that we as human beings are wired for intimacy. So what that means is that we have to have an intimate connection to whoever we are having a physical relationship with. It's required. So having random sex just because it feels good, our bodies and our brains don't know how to deal with that. They don't know how to understand it. And so while consciously we might be like, oh, well, I agree to do this. I'm okay with this. Our brains are not. So there's a lot of subconscious trauma that happens, right? There's a lot of, when bad things happen to us in our life, like, God forbid, we lose somebody close to us, right? Somebody dies in a car accident. That's a traumatic event. Well, when those things happen, we know, and sometimes we can deal with it, we can process it. The problem is that when people engage in commercial sex, they don't understand the trauma, they don't understand what's actually going on in their heads, and a lot of that gets suppressed. We talk about very real victimization, right? These individuals go through a great deal of trauma, whether they realize it or not. Human trafficking has become the #2 criminal enterprise in the world, and it is projected that as it continues to grow at its current rate in the next 5 to 7 years, it will become the #1 criminal enterprise in the world. I've been saying girls, I've referred to the victims as girls most of this time. Can boys be victims of trafficking too? Yes. Most of our cases are in fact girls, but we do see boys being exploited as well. If you want more information, I would highly recommend that you go to www.justask.org. That has a lot of good information. It's broken down into 3 sections. One for teens, one for parents, so how parents can protect their children and have this conversation. It's not a conversation we would normally have around the dinner table. But unfortunately, it's a reality.